Do you ever look at your favorite golfer like John Rahm or Colin Morikawa, or maybe you watch a YouTube video and the instructor's telling you to bow the left wrist, but no matter how hard you try in the golf swing, you just can't achieve this? Well, chances are there might actually be a physical limitation in there. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how you can test this to find out if you do have a physical limitation, and if you do have a physical limitation, how we can find a workaround for you. So before we jump into the main part of the video, we just got to define what is wrist flexion and what is wrist extension. So these are the ways that the wrist can work. Flexion, extension in terms of these two planes right here. They can also work radial and ulnar. We're not worried about that today, just flexion, extension. So flexion is where both wrists work into this sort of bowed position. You can see I'm bowing it inwards. Extension is the opposite. The wrists sort of work back on themselves. They get this cupped shape. And again, our wrists are constantly moving, flexion, extension throughout the whole swing. Now, when you look at like a John Rahm or a Colin Morikawa, how are they able to achieve this good top of the backswing position that kind of the modern day coach really likes to see, which is this very much a flexed lead wrist, where the lead wrist is pointing more to the sky, the trail wrist has a lot of extension? Well, first of all, you've got to understand that they have a lot of mobility in their wrists, in their flexion, in their lead wrist, and their extension in their trail wrist. So they have the mobility to actually sustain this position. If you don't have the mobility to sustain this position, it's going to be very, very difficult to even get close to it, and ultimately your body is going to resent it. For example, if you can't touch your toes, and then I said, right, I'm going to force you to where you touch your toes, you're going to cause injury to your body, right? It's the same thing in flexion. If you can't flex your lead wrist, and I'm suddenly trying to force you to flex your lead wrist, your body's going to resist it, it's going to fight against it. So we have to find a workaround. So let's stop guessing and let's start testing. Here is the test that we're going to do that's going to help you know if you have good wrist mobility and if you can achieve this top of the backswing position where you can get the flexion that so many people are talking about. So what you're going to do is you are going to grab a 6 iron. Now, industry standard for the lie angle, which is the angle between the shaft here and then the sort of sole of the club, this angle right here, is around 60 degrees. What you're going to do is you're going to take both your hands out in front of you, arms straight, and make a fist. And again, I'm doing it from this angle. Now, if you're doing this by yourself, you're obviously going to have to do one at a time. But if you have somebody to help you, you can do sort of both of them at the same time. Now, just to highlight this, I'm going to do it with my left arm, but repeat the process with your right arm as well. So I'm going to hold my arm out in front of me, and I'm going to make a fist. Now, to start with, we're going to measure flexion. So remember, flexion is where we bow that lead wrist, we go down. Now, if I grab the club and I hold that lie angle there, if I don't get to the lie angle, that means that then there is some restriction in that lead wrist. If I can get all the way down and match that lie angle, or if anything go past it, as you can see right there, a lot of mobility, that is a good indication that I have a good amount of wrist flexion in that lead wrist and I have good mobility there. If you're short of it, that is an indication that, hold on a second, maybe that wrist flexion like Colin Morikawa is not for you. We might need to find a workaround. Now, the second one is now obviously measuring the extension. So again, the same principle, but this time we're going to come back on ourselves. Get your 6 iron. This time we're going to go toe up. Can we match that lie angle right there? As you can see, quite a bit of wrist mobility in terms of both ways for me. Now, you might find as you do this that you are the same, you have good mobility both ways. You might find that you're limited one way or the other, or you might find both ways are limited. In which case, then we can start to tailor what you're going to do with your wrist in the golf swing. Now, once you've done it with the left hand, then do it with the right hand. Again, flexion, extension, see it, write down what is good, what is bad. So let's now use the findings we've just got in our mobility test, and let's relate it to your golf swing now. So I'm going to focus on the lead wrist. I will do videos later down the line focusing on the trail wrist, but we're going to focus on the lead wrist and how it relates to the club face so that you can deliver the club face as consistent as possible. If you are a golfer who is struggling a little bit more with the flexion of your lead wrist, so you struggle with your left hand going this way, that is then an indication that potentially we are going to struggle to get into this position at the top where the lead wrist is bowed. In that situation, we need to find a workaround. So let's think about what bowing of the lead wrist can do for a golfer. One of the biggest things and one of the most common reasons as to why golf pros will get you to do this is because it allows you to take control of your club face. It gets it in a little bit more of a square to slightly closed position. Now, this is really important for controlling things like shaft lean on the way down. So if your club face is in a square to slightly closed position, you can actually deliver some shaft lean and you can get into a really nice sort of, you can get into a really nice impact position right there. Now, here's the thing. If you cannot achieve that wrist flexion position, is it game over? No, we just find a workaround, right? So what is that workaround if you struggle with wrist flexion? Well, if you struggle with wrist flexion, what we need to do is we need to strengthen your lead hand grip, your left hand grip. So what does that look like? Well, let's just say a conventional grip, a relatively neutral grip, is 2 knuckles on the lead hand. So you can see right here, as I grip this, I can see 1, 2 knuckles, the V's pointing somewhere up to my right ear, right collarbone. Now, if you do that and you find that, oh, do you know what, I'm hitting this high weak shot, can't get into that wrist flexion at the top of the backswing, let's then just work with your wrist conditions. Let's still achieve a good club face position without having to bow the wrist. So what we're going to do is take it from 2 knuckles to 3 knuckles. We're just going to strengthen it round slightly. Now the great thing about this is, as you can see, naturally as I do this, it moves my wrist into a little bit more of an extended position, so a little bit more of a cupped position right here. So what this is doing is it's releasing the amount of tension in my wrist, so I don't have to go into flexion. I can naturally have it in a little bit more of a cupped position, and that's then going to allow the face to sit in a great spot naturally. So in that position there, now as I go to the top, you can see I don't have to have a cupped wrist. I can actually have a relatively neutral wrist, and that then takes care of the club face automatically. Because I have changed my hand orientation on the club, I'm naturally now going to affect the club face position. So this is how we can actually go, okay, look, you've got a limitation. Every golfer has limitations, but let's work with it. Let's not fight it. Let's work around it. So if you struggle with wrist flexion in the lead wrist, let's strengthen that left hand grip. Now, what if you did that test and it turned out that you had loads of flexion but not a lot of extension, so you couldn't really cup that lead wrist? Well, in this situation, then lucky for you, you can sort of fall into this Collin Morikawa category, because you can really find it easy to get into that flexion, but the extension bit's really, really tricky. Again, this is what, if you listen to Jon Rahm talk about his swing, he's done the same test that I've just shown you, and he came out with the conclusion that he has an absolute ton of wrist flexion, but extension, he doesn't have anywhere near as much. This is why he naturally goes into that pattern. Well, if you are that golfer who does naturally go into that pattern right there, if you then take a stronger grip, like we just spoke about with a player that struggles with the wrist flexion, what you would actually find is at the top, you would just get that club face way too closed. So what we would have to do for you is we would have to move you into what we class as a little bit more of a neutral to slightly weaker left hand grip. So what does that mean and what does that look like? Well, if we go back to the neutral position, we can see that, again, 2 knuckles right here. But what if you really do have a lot of wrist flexion? You see at the top of your backswing, your wrist lights to go into that position. Well, what I then want you to do is potentially just rotate that hand around just a little bit. So you can see I've got about 1.5 knuckles visible there. The V's pointing a little bit more up to my right eye. Now, this is where I fall into as a category. Now, from my personal experience, when a player has a lot of wrist mobility, I should say, so they get a lot of wrist flexion at the top of the backswing, and you pair it up with a neutral to slightly stronger grip, what happens is the club face gets very closed. So from my personal experience, I hit the ball very low in that situation, and I also pull it left because the club face is closed. That's also going to de-loft the club way too much, and also if I don't quite de-loft it enough to get it straight, it's going to go left. So in that situation, if you're looking to gain a little bit more control over the face, a little bit more height to it, we need to weaken the grip so that it cancels it out. It gets the club face into a nice neutral position to slightly close at the top, but nothing too excessive. So again, weakening off that left hand grip slightly, so rotating it round as a right-handed golfer to the left. That's then going to put me in a position at the top to where when I do flex that wrist, that club face is still relatively square to slightly closed, but it's in a range to where you can still hit some beautiful functional golf shots. So what if you're that golfer who had a limited range of motion in both the flexion and the extension? Well, this one is a little bit trickier in a sense. The easy answer for me to give would be, do you know what, stick to something relatively neutral. But what I would say is look at your golf swing as a whole. If you are somebody who struggles with both flexion and extension, look at majority of what your club face does throughout the swing. So we know you are limited in your range of motion. If you take a, let's just say, a standard grip, but we still see that your club face wants to be open in the golf swing, then I would say, all right, let's actually strengthen that grip. Now, if you are that golfer, again, limited range of motion in both flexion and extension, but in your swing, you have a relatively neutral grip and you look at the top and it's got a closed club face, I would say, okay, maybe we need to just weaken your grip off. So the golfer who has a limited range of motion in both flexion and extension, it's a little bit of a case-by-case situation. In that situation, you have to see, okay, what does my club face do naturally in the swing? Is it in a good square to slightly closed position? Yes, awesome, don't need to change anything. If it's too closed, maybe go slightly weaker in that left hand grip. So if you're a right-handed golfer, rotate that back to the left. And if you have a pattern where the club face gets a little bit too open, and again, limited range of motion both ways, then I would say, right, let's just strengthen that grip slightly. Again, that's a little bit more of an awkward one. There's not as much hard and fast rules. It's something where we can personalize it a little bit more to you. So as you can see, what we've really done is we've related the lead hand to the club face positioning at the top of the backswing. And all good golfers are amazing at controlling their club face position. You have to be. Club face controls so much in the golf swing. If you can't control it, we're going to be in trouble. So if you need help actually identifying yourself where you fit into it, how we can match up your swing, I offer online coaching. You can have a lesson no matter where you are in the world. I do it all on the Skillist online coaching app. I'll leave the link down in the description. If you have enjoyed today's video, please give it a like and subscribe, and I hope to see you back here soon.